tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan
Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled are playwright Bernard Weinraub and author Lori Hanson. A former journalist who was a reporter for the New York Times, Bernard Weinraub was born and raised in New York, attended high school in the Bronx, and went to City College of New York. He worked in Washington, D.C., where he covered politics in the Reagan and Bush White House. In 1991, Bernie, you moved to L.A. to cover Hollywood. Was that a change from politics?
Well, I'm not sure it was a change. It was a little different, but not as much of a difference as you would think.
Did you see the politics going on?
There was a lot of politics going on, but some of the characters were pretty similar than the ones in Washington.
Did you ask for that change?
Yeah, a couple of years before, I was always interested in movies and the film business. And I was interested in the economics of the film business and movies. And I had asked about the possibility of coming here if there was an opening, and there was an opening, and the Times asked me to come here, and I came, and I was really happy about that.
Well, did you meet your wife here? Because she was in the film business, right?
Yes, my wife was in the film business, and after a couple of years here, I met my wife here, and then a couple of years later, we got married.
Oh, so that was a good move.
That was an excellent. It was an excellent move. It was a great move in my life, right?
So when you were here covering Hollywood, what kind of similarities did the Hollywood players have with the politicians? Were the politicians kind of buttering you up when you were in Washington?
No? It's not a question of buttering up, but in Washington, it's about power and ego.
So they expect you to be with them.
Well, it's about power and ego, and here it's about power and ego in some ways. It's a little more here, it's more about money. In Washington, it's not so much about money, but it's more about power. But there are similarities between the personalities of both coasts.
I know, I hate to say that, but I'm sure that's true. Once you got out here, did you start going to the theater more than when you were back east?
Well, I went to theater, a certain amount of theater in Washington, and more theater in New York since it was the East Coast. And here I went to a little bit of theater, but I was so involved, obviously, in going to movies here. But I was always interested in playwriting. I've been interested in playwriting actually since the time I went to college.
But how different playwriting and writing a story for a newspaper seems to me so different.
Totally different.
It is totally.
Totally different. I mean, it's night and day. And I mean, one is essentially fiction, and that's playwriting. It's not journalism.
Exactly. I'm wondering.
Although some people have written fiction, no, it's. I mean, although this current play, The Accomplices, is based on real events, it is a play, and as a play, it is essentially fiction, although based on real events. And journalism is based on fact. It's based on reality. It is reality.
Let's get to The Accomplice. It must have been in your mind. Was it in your mind before you took these playwriting classes, or did you take playwriting and then they brought it out of you?
Yes. The Accomplices was really, went back to my time in Washington when I was at the Times in Washington, and in the early 80s I was assigned to do a story about a documentary, a PBS documentary called Who Shall Live and Who Shall Die. And it was by a young filmmaker, Larry Jarvik, and it was about the early 40s and the Roosevelt administration and what it was doing about Jews in the 40s in Europe, you know, during the early years of the Holocaust, and what it was doing and what it wasn't doing. And it was fascinating to me. And it was, And it was a controversial documentary, and I just became interested in the subject.
But you weren't writing about it.
No, I wasn't, but it caused some kind of controversy, and I did a story or two about it, and that led to my interest, and I just became interested in the subject, and I began reading about it and talking to some people about it, and that was always in the back of my mind. And when I was out here, I just began reading more and more about it, and that led me to a playwriting course at UCLA that I took at night with Simon Levy. And I began writing in the late 90s, early 2000 or so. Just began writing this play.
But in that playwriting class, did you
In the
write
playwriting
some of
class.
it? You did write some of it
I actually
there.
began writing, and actually the first scene of the play was the first scene that I wrote in the class. After that, the current play has no bearing to what I wrote in the class, but the first scene was actually what I wrote.
Is that right?
The first scene Simon Levy said the first time was write a scene, and that was the first scene actually that I wrote.
And then, but it changes so much over
Well,
the
yes,
years.
I mean the play went through many drafts. It was just totally serendipitous that the first scene was the current scene in the play.
So what happened to it then? You
I-
started rewriting it. Did it
Well, I
open?
wrote many drafts, and I kept writing it, and then I submitted it to a contest called. It was a contest. I'm having a memory block, but I submitted it, and it won a contest in New York, and as a result, the new group, a really wonderful theater in New York, saw it and read it, and they decided to do the play.
So they
in New York.
produced it in New
and
York.
they produced it in New York.
And it was a full production?
A full production, and it was fantastic. And they did it in New York, and as a result of that, a lot of people saw it, and it was reviewed, and it was nominated for a Drama Desk Award as Best Play and all that, and it was all a great thrill. And then it was produced at the Gables Theater in Coral Gables, and then
So it went to Florida?
Florida, and then it was produced here by the Fountain Theater, which is run by Simon Levy and
Which was
Stephen
just-
Sachs and others. You know.
Yeah, that was just by coincidence that it ended up like that? Not having to do anything with your playwriting class?
No, it had nothing to do with the playwriting class, because the new group and all of that had nothing to do with the
Let
playwriting
me
class.
go back to when you say it was your first play and you went through many drafts and you
Yeah.
submitted it. Did it feel?
Excuse me, the name of the contest, I'm sorry,
Okay.
was the Stellar Network.
Stella Network.
And that was a US-UK group, and I just had heard about it. Somebody had told me about it, and I just submitted it blindly. And in fact, when you submit it, you don't even submit your name. They take your name off, and the jurors just read it, and it won. And one of the jurors was connected to the new group, and he read it, and it won. And he just told the new group, and they read it, and they really liked it, and they produced it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, if it felt like you were belittling yourself to submit something, because when you were writing for the newspaper, you just put your copy in and they wrote it. I mean, you got published all the time. Did this feel funny to you, having to have
No,
people?
because not at all, because most plays are never produced. And so you do what you can do, and I never in my wildest dreams thought it would be produced.
I see. So now it's at the Fountain Theater, The Accomplices, and it's based on a true story.
Yes, it's based on one man, Peter Bergson, a young man who came to the United States from what was Palestine. He was an Israeli, and he led a small group of Europeans and Israelis in the early 40s, and they were called the Bergson Boys, who did what they could to alert the government and alert Jews in the United States to what was happening to Jews in Europe. And they met tremendous resistance from the US government and, surprisingly, from very prominent Jews, Rabbi Stephen Wise and others. And the story just fascinated me. And that's what the play is about.
So it's at the Fountain, and it's being directed by whom?
It's by Deborah, yeah.
Deborah Levine?
Deborah Levine, yes.
And do you have any connection with her? Do you cast with her? Do you sit in the theater with her?
Well,
'Cause you're here.
I've gone to the rehearsals, a lot of rehearsals, and I sat in on the casting. And
You did.
Sure, she asked me, and she listened to me a bit, but she's the director, and we all we're a team. And I sat in on a bunch of the rehearsals, and I'm going to rehearsals this afternoon, but after this, and I sit in on a lot of the rehearsals.
Is it like writing a film where you should be around to do rewrites? Do you do rewrites at all?
Well, in the theater, the writer really is very important. I don't know if the writer is king, but the writer really is important. In films, I don't think the writer is that important. I mean, you can ask any screenwriter, and the writers are always saying that they're not important. And when a film is being made, I don't think many writers stay on the set. It's very rare. While in the theater, the writer is always in the theater during rehearsals. So the writer is kind of king.
Well, do you get antsy? Do you want to direct? Do you feel like you want to jump up and...
I can't even think of that now. I'm just a fledgling writer, so I'm not even thinking of directing.
Is that right? So it doesn't, when you see something going on and your words are being said on stage, you don't say, oh, I wish she would have done it like
well,
that?
Well, if I have a thought about it, I just go over and whisper to Deborah and say, maybe he should go there or something, you know.
What do we have next? What are you writing next?
I've written another play, which was just read, which was picked by this really great group called New York Stage and Film in New York, and it was just read this past week at Vassar with the actress Famke Janssen.
Oh, great.
It's called Above the Fold, and it's about journalists.
Oh, right, Above the Fold,
yeah.
Which is where we all want to be, right?
Everybody. Most everybody wants to be, I guess. I don't particularly want to be, but most people do.
Well, now that your plays are there, you want your plays to be above the fold.
I want my plays to be above the fold, I guess.
Thank you very much, Bernie, for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for watching. We'll be right back with author Lori Hanson. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Author Lori Hanson was born and raised in Michigan. After high school in Ohio, and all this traveling back and forth, she went back to Michigan and graduated from the University of Michigan. Lori built her career in information technology and software. Those are things I know nothing about. Did you ever write about computers?
I wrote a couple of articles at one point.
Oh, you did?
But, yeah, but that was a long time ago.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it was a
long
long
How
time
did you
ago.
get into that? Is that what you studied at university?
No. I studied business administration, management, and organization.
Oh.
And I spent a few years doing human resources work, and then I got into this world of consulting. So I've worked with software systems and creating custom software systems most of my life.
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
Or however you do it. You do it with big companies?
Yes, absolutely.
You do. Okay, besides being able to do all that, you're an accomplished lyricist and singer. Did you write about that?
I've written about 12 lyrics now and have recorded the songs. Yep, so I'm getting ready to put a CD together.
And in your book,
right.
It started with Pop-Tarts. You've used some of that.
Yes.
And how did you intertwine it?
You know, the lyrics were part of my processing as I started actually writing the lyrics first. I knew I wanted to write the book, but I started writing lyrics first, and I said, you know, these lyrics have been a lot of my processing. They talk about different forms of control that I've had in my life, which has been part of my bulimia.
Well, do you think that just came out of what you were doing? I mean, I guess lyrics are always really personal, right?
Yes. Well, you know, it's interesting. A man that I was dating at the time was actually the one that challenged me and said, have you ever written lyrics? And I said, no, I can't write lyrics, but I thought it's such a great way to express myself, most people to express themselves, so I gave it a shot.
So here we have, it started with Pop-Tarts. It's a great title.
Thank
It's an
you.
alternative approach to winning the battle of bulimia. Now, how'd you get the title? And did it really start with Pop-Tarts?
It did. You know, it's so funny. People ask. I wanted something humorous because my writing style is somewhat humorous. I mean, this is a deep topic, so I don't want to just totally depress people. And I, you know, most people laugh when they hear it started with Pop-Tarts, and then they hear bulimia, and they're like, oh, but that's, that's kind of the reaction.
But why do we want to hear Lori? Who's Lori? We don't know Lori.
Exactly. Who am I? Well,
Really,
the reason I wrote the book is because I struggled for over 20 years with bulimia itself, and I didn't realize until I started writing the book that I spent the next 10 then doing the same behaviors with alcohol. If I was upset, if I was happy, if I was sad, let's go get a bottle of wine or let's go out. And so I did the same thing, but what I found is part of my healing. For me, the counseling wasn't enough. It didn't get me where I needed to be. It didn't help me figure out how to express myself, but through meditation and through energy healing and through different forms of body work, I've been able to find out how to be in the present and how to live my life much differently.
And so that's the story that you can give to the public.
Right. I have not seen anybody else share a story with an alternative approach like what I brought to the table.
So it doesn't really have to be about bulimia.
No.
It could be about anything if you use your approach.
Right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
When I was reading the book, I went through, and each chapter really tells the story. It starts from the beginning. It tells your story, I should say. It starts at the beginning and goes all the way through. Like the first, one of the first chapters is Issues Evolve. And I love the one when you talk about macaroni and cheese and that. So tell us a little bit about that chapter part of it.
Well, it's the issues for me started, you asked about the Pop-Tarts. The Pop-Tarts started when I was in high school. And unlike most kids, I actually went to a parochial, a boarding school. It was co-ed. It wasn't Catholic. That's what most people was. It wasn't Catholic. I was raised Seventh-day Adventist. And I got to school and I just didn't feel like I fit in, and I wasn't one of the cool kids. So I discovered that this little bag of Pop-Tarts that a friend and I had, brought back from the cafeteria was a real easy way to just kind of make myself feel better when I wasn't feeling good. Well, so that progressed. High school it started. College it got much worse. And that's when I discovered the beauty of pasta and macaroni and cheese and pizza and ice cream, the comfort food.
But the thing that you say is you can't just buy one box of macaroni.
No, exactly.
What is
no, one isn't the trick. You've got to buy the deluxe family size, and you got to get 2 of them. Absolutely.
So that you can gorge completely?
Gluttony.
But you say you didn't fit in, and your parents were part of those Adventist academies. I mean, your mother taught music, your father was the
accountant in the early days.
So how could you not fit in? You should have been the chosen one.
Well, it wasn't, when I say fit in, I just mean I wasn't accepted by other kids.
Well, that's what I mean.
I just didn't come out of this early childhood years with a good sense of self-esteem. Number one, I found out that I was supposed to be a boy.
Oh, so you have these...
And I don't think they meant to intentionally hurt me by saying that, but I owned that, and I'm like, well, they really wanted a boy. I'm the third girl. I knew what my name was supposed to be. And from 4 years old, I begged for trucks. I am, a
just
complete tomboy. And that's what I felt like was just me, but I think now I was trying to find where I fit. We had Twiggy as the model when we were young. So, what still happens today is society puts a lot of pressure on us. You're supposed to look like, these model thin actresses and fashion models. And I'm short and muscular. I'm not tall and thin.
So the next one of the chapters we get to is bulimia. And what is it, and when did it start with you?
I was 14 when I first started using food to comfort myself.
And that's what we were talking about, macaroni and cheese and comfort food
and the Pop-Tarts and all. Now, what most people don't know is that bulimia actually has 2 types. There's what we call purging and non-purging bulimics. Bulimia basically means you're inhaling, you're inhaling huge amounts of food to the point where you can barely move, and you're doing something to control the weight gain.
You talked about that, where you would eat so much and you couldn't sleep at night, or you knew you weren't going to be able to sleep.
Yep.
And you would keep doing it.
And I would keep doing it. And the next day I had a big meeting, I had a presentation to make, and if you eat that much food and you don't purge like I didn't, you're swollen. I mean, you can hardly move.
But why didn't you purge? That's what we think bulimics always go to the bathroom right after they finished eating, and get rid of.
Number one, I couldn't. I would try to stick my finger down my throat. I could not cause myself to throw up. The thought of using laxatives to me was totally disgusting. I did some diet pills, but not to control it. So what I did, my secret thrashing was I would eat these horrific amounts of food, and then I would go on a very, very strict diet. I weighed and measured myself every Sunday, and that gave me, as I mentioned in the book, that gave me a reason to either say, hey, I made a little progress, or look at what you did. You know, it's a terrible, terrible chronic cycle of abuse.
So, but what you say also is that you have to gain self-esteem in order to get rid of it, right?
Yes.
And how did you do that?
You know, it started with an audio tape series that I found back in the mid-90s. So mind you, I'm already in my mid-30s by the time I really found a way to increase my self-esteem.
Oh, you were that far
Yeah.
along?
Yeah.
Because you say I was 135 pounds and tubby.
Yeah.
Well, we'd all love to be 135 pounds.
For me, but when I looked in the mirror, I saw a person that was much heavier than what I was. You know, anorexic, we think, oh my goodness, they look terrible. They can't hide it the way I could, because I was, you know, because my weight fluctuated 10, maybe 15 pounds. People with the book coming out are like, I never had any idea. Well, of course not. It's easy to hide.
But you were in control of that.
Exactly.
I see.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you started looking for your self-esteem
Yeah.
in your 30s.
I had,
Looking
you know,
for your
I always
self-esteem.
looking for, yes, my
Looking for
lost
love.
self-esteem the last years, yes. I had always wanted to evolve as a person, and I was always trying to grow better. I went through, I mentioned in my book, I went through some counseling in my mid-20s and figured out why I became bulimic. But he didn't help me learn to express myself. So all I did was stuff it down with food, right? I didn't scream, I don't get angry, I don't have a temper, I just tuck it all away. So in the mid-90s, I found this wonderful tape series from Jack Canfield, who's now the author of Chicken Soup books, but this was way before that. And that's when I started to learn little sayings like, no matter what you say or do to me, I'm still a worthwhile person. I had to plug that in, I didn't know that.
So you think that's really
That's sad.
important to keep telling yourself those kind of things?
For me, that's what, he had a tape that had 200 affirmations on it that I put in the car for 3 months, driving back and forth to work every
Really?
day, and just had to feed positive affirmation. I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel like I measured up to what other people did.
One of the things that we also is mentioned in here is candida and fatigue. How does that affect your life? And why did you mention it?
It's terrible because there are chemical imbalances, there are chemical things that come into play with eating disorders that most people don't realize. The thing that fed into candida is that as a young child I had many ear infections.
Oh, right.
And I was on penicillin. By the time I was 12, the doctors were concerned about how much I'd been on penicillin. Now we have amoxicillin and all these other flavors. But that kills off your good flora, right? So you get this imbalance, and that evolved into a huge sugar sensitivity.
But why were you getting those earaches?
You know, that I'm not sure about. I as a young kid, I was convinced that I was sickly, and I never really bought into it. I was, you know, was like, oh, poor Lori, she's got all these ear infections, and they gave me all these allergy tests, and never found anything.
Is the candida a fungus type of thing?
Yes.
Does it stay in your body forever?
Candida is actually the yeast that, when we die, eats our body up. But when you get an overgrowth of candida, it's ugly. There's a lot of people. It's very common in people, but they may not know they have it. It affects splitting fingernails. It affects chronic fatigue. It's very similar to fibromyalgia.
How do you get rid of it?
I've been through a lot of things to try and get rid of it. I finally found a good acupuncture that helped. I found a number of yeast formulas that help, or candida formulas that help to counterbalance it, and I rebuilt my flora. Yeah.
And the other thing is that I thought was kind of funny. You're a gourmet vegan cook.
Yes.
Those two things don't go together.
Doesn't it sound
for
funny?
me.
Yeah, doesn't it
Gourmet
sound funny?
and vegan.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
Yep. Well, and I grew up vegetarian. So
You
about
did.
5 years ago, after doing a colon cleanse, I just decided, you know, let me just hang with this for a while, because I didn't eat a lot of cheese and butter. And I feel
Because
better
you were
that
a
way.
vegetarian, right?
Yeah. So, well, I grew up eating cheese. I grew up
That's
eating
what I mean,
dairy.
'cause of-
Yeah. But I feel better without it. Now, I do also feel that contributed some to my eating disorder, because as a young kid, my diet was too much carbs. I didn't get enough tryptophan from some of the things that I grew up on soy-based meats.
Oh,
So
you
we
did?
we didn't always have balanced meals, and I think that also played in along with the binges to my problem.
Well, but vegan isn't balanced either, is it?
Well, there's a number of things that I've done now because of what I did to myself for 30 years that I still take natural supplements. But it's like I take vitamin B and vitamin C. Zinc a lot of times is low in people that are bulimic. I've got a list of 13 things that actually contribute to binge eating, which is more than just bulimics.
But you're not bulimic anymore.
Right.
But you still refer to yourself as trying to improve those situations?
Now it's about balance.
I see.
My ultimate message really now is about balance and finding that balance in life. I definitely feel like I'm recovered from my bulimia, but I want to make sure that I keep my body healthy, that I keep my life in balance, that I'm not just working crazy. And
when you're eating this gourmet vegan, just tell me one thing that's like a recipe. I don't think you have any recipes in the
No,
book,
that's
do
actually
you?
coming. No, I'm writing a vegan vegetarian cookbook.
Oh, I was going to ask you what was next. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I'm writing a
Okay, tell
book
us
that
a
has
little
both.
bit about it. What's it going to say? What's the title?
I haven't figured out the title yet. I'm still putting it together, but I want to write a book that incorporates a lot of recipes I had growing up, but there's also vegan options. You usually get one or the other, and I want to have a book that has both vegetarian or vegan, so that I have a number of friends that when they would have me over, they're like, what do I cook for you?
I know. What do you eat?
Yeah. I eat all kinds of things. It's just different than meat and fish and that type of thing.
And you get enough nutrients from it?
Yes. Now I eat quinoa and millet that are different types of grains that are very protein rich. I drink green shakes, which I talk about in the book.
Green tea? Green, just
green.
green
Yeah, so
vegetable.
romaine and kale and those
Green
types of
leaf.
things. So a lot of nutrient-rich foods. But I don't start. I mean, I'm not wasting away.
No, you certainly look good. What about the music? You're going to do a CD?
Absolutely. Just finishing production on the CD, which is a lot of fun because there's some songs beyond just what was processing now.
And who'll sing them?
I'm singing them.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I grew up very musical, so I'm actually singing
that's
the
right.
music.
Your
Yeah.
mother was the...
My mother was the musician, yeah. So it's called Systems of Control, oddly enough. So, yeah, talking about all those different things that influenced me growing up and breaking out of those systems of control.
Oh, this has been great. Thank
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
And thank you for being with us today. Keep writing. Write me an email, jaquinn1@aol.com, and 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor. JAQUINN1. See you next time.